You have big ADHD feelings, like super intense feelings, and sometimes you feel flooded and overwhelmed by them. Or maybe you feel like you can hardly access your feelings at all. Like maybe you've spent years or decades even pushing them down or trying to manage or control them so that you really don't even notice that many feelings. You're just like, oh, it's fine. If that's you, either side of it, today we're going to work with ADHD feelings. A lot of us were taught and continue to be told to push down our feelings, to manage our feelings, to make them not be so big and see them as problematic. But the real problem is actually the suppression of these emotions. Because not only can this create problems for us in the short term, in our relationships, in our body, in how we experience things, but also can create some long-term issues. So today we're going to unpack it all and I'm going to share with you how to work with the feelings when they do arise. Be sure to listen. Welcome to the Self-Loved ADHD Woman's Way podcast. I'm your host, Jen Barnes. If you're an ADHD woman entrepreneur, ADHD adjacent, or ADHD-ish, you've come to the right place. We'll dive deep into the unique challenges you face, from the inner turmoil to the outer obstacles. We'll blend neuroscience, IFS, and somatic healing and explore practical strategies to help you navigate the world of entrepreneurship with ADHD with greater ease and effectiveness. I'm glad you're here. Hey, it's Jen. I'm so glad you're here. So, feelings. I feel like I should almost tell a story about this. I've recorded this podcast twice now. One was last week or 2 weeks ago, and the recording was messed up. One was this morning, and it wasn't really vibing with me. And so now we're here. And I share that because I want to be as transparent as and human as possible. And also, it's part of our process of like, oh wow, that I had feelings about that. I had feelings about how that one felt. And this isn't about perfection, but really about feelings. So anyway, I'm going to start this attempt with a story. And this story, I'm guessing, might resonate with some of you. This story is about a little girl named Jenny. Jenny had big feelings as a little girl, and she was told that she was too sensitive. It was too much, too intense. When she would come home from school in ninth grade and cry, she was told that if she didn't stop crying, that she would be pulled out of her private school and put into a public school that she didn't want to go to. Not that there's anything wrong with public school, to be clear. At any rate, and told to shut down those feelings. And so over time, Jenny learned that she was quote unquote too much for people. And so learned to shut down her feelings so that by the time she got into college, she found that she didn't actually, besides her freshman year roommate, didn't really connect with her female friends. She didn't really feel connected to them. And so she liked hanging out with guys better and didn't realize until her, I don't know, say 40s, that part of the reason she liked connecting with guys so much in her coming of age years is because in that day and age, men were really disconnected from their feelings. So it was low risk. There wasn't a lot of vulnerability. Is this sounding familiar to anyone else besides me? This is such a common story. And if you are over a certain age, you might even be resonating with it. If you're younger, you might be like, no, everyone let me feel my feelings. And now they're so big, I don't know what to do with them. And we're going to talk about both today because they both speak to ADHD and our sensitivity and the big feelings we have and how those feelings have been allowed, not allowed, shamed, been told they're too much, or something of the kind. So if you feel like you need to douse those feelings, if you feel like you have doused them for so long you don't have access, this episode's for you. This is super common. And there's a reason why emotions can be so hard for we ADHD women. And it's because of the messages we received that we're too much, that people can't handle our big feelings, that they can't be friends with us because of our stuff. They don't, our parents couldn't tolerate it. Whatever those messages are, We were told it was too much. I even remember in my early days going to therapy in my 20s. This was when I was still an actuary, so I wasn't a therapist yet, which technically I was an actuarial analyst. I hadn't passed all my exams. I never did. I switched to social work before that happened. Anyway, just trying to be accurate. So I remember going to therapy. This is in the 90s. And the therapist would teach, and I remember teaching this myself in the early years to picture a stop sign for your anxiety or other big feelings and just stop and then just try and calm your body, which is like the exact opposite of what I teach now and the exact opposite of what you do or what you need to do when your big feelings come up. And in fact, I've since seen people comment on how uncomfortable many therapists are with big feelings. And I see that because when I've come in with my big feelings, a lot of them can't handle it. And that doesn't mean they're bad people. It's just that, there's lots of different pieces that go around that, right? It's just that they're human and a lot of therapists actually we're a profession that had the highest ACEs score, the adverse childhood experiences. So we're basically a profession with a lot of trauma. So it makes sense that big feelings would be overwhelming for therapists, right? And it makes sense then that our profession created tools to try and bring down the feelings. So I get it. If in some way you have been suppressing your feelings or feeling like you need to control or manage them, you're not alone and you're not bad or wrong. And doing that is not helping you. Now, to be clear, before I dive into this a little more, I'm not talking about sitting in your feeling for days and weeks and ruminating. That's different than working with the feelings as they come up. But if we don't work with the feelings, then we can end up in those ruminating spaces. And it's not useful to ignore our feelings. I want to talk about why. The first two reasons are actually problems. And even, I don't know if I want to say dangers, that makes it sound dramatic, but I guess we're talking about big feelings that can happen when we don't feel our feelings. So, number one, when we try and push our feelings down, we can come across as inauthentic, but also those feelings eventually bubble up. I'm sure you notice this, right? Like you might be having feelings that you're pushing down, pushing down, and then eventually there's like an explosion of feelings, much like if you're trying to hold a beach ball underwater, right? You can do it a while and it's hard but doable, but then eventually the water or the beach ball breaches the surface, often in the form of a water explosion. Which is usually fine because you're kind of expecting it because you're probably in the lake doing it or pool. But with emotions, usually they breach the surface in the form of an explosion at inconvenient times. And in inconvenient ways. And so then this becomes a problem, not just for us and how, people perceive us and how we navigate our life, but also in our relationships, because instead of handling things along the way, we come at people with big stuff. So I want to talk about what to do instead. But first, I want to talk about the other problem with not embracing our big feelings or whatever feelings we're having. Our feelings are actually neurobiological signals from inside of us saying, "You who notice this." And it might be you who notice this. This feels awesome. Do more. Like when when I'm doing Zumba, I was doing Zumba this morning. It was so much fun. It was like, oh yeah, this is awesome. I could feel happy. I could feel joy. And that's my body saying, this is it, girl. Do more of this. Whereas if you're feeling something that you're like angry or pissed, that's your body, your parts of yours way of saying, yoo-hoo, there's been a violation here. Address it. Set a boundary, right? Sadness is something else. Sadness is usually there's a loss or something to grieve, to work through. And that needs attention too. But when we suppress our feelings, when we push them down or try and make them smaller, try and manage or control them, then we're missing out on the message. We don't get the learning and healing and growth that can come from being with our feelings, because sometimes those feelings are an invitation to deeper work. That's something I'm actually going through now. I've been having some bigger feelings, and I know that this is an invitation from inside to work through another layer of my own healing and growth. And sure, I could probably find, I mean, I'm a therapist. I got all kinds of tools to regulate my nervous system. And I did a lot of therapy before anyone talked about IFS, working with our parts, or any somatic therapy. So I can think my way out of any problem for a while. But that's not what I like to do anymore. I actually like to work through things. And I hope that you're here because that's what you want to do too. Or I'm here to give you the tools when you feel ready to do that. Before we get into that, I want to talk about some language. So, first of all, you already heard me talking about parts. If you haven't been listening for a while, we all have parts of us. We all have parts of us that feel different things, that hold different experiences, some that maybe even have extreme roles, and all of our parts are welcome. All of our parts are just trying to help us in some way. And so as you're hearing me talk about parts, that's all that's coming from, and I want you to know that. Secondly, I want to name that a lot of us come by these patterns so honestly. If you are in your 40s or older, so what? For sure, boomers and older, for sure, most of Gen X and older, and actually most millennials, especially the elder millennials, you probably in some way were told to like tone it down. And you probably were not taught how to work with your feelings. I know some of the younger millennials may have had access to some of that only because I was already in the field at that point, teaching kids feelings and working with feelings. Not that your parents always knew them, so there may be some crossover there where you have more access. And what I see in Gen Z is you've been taught so much of your feelings, but that no one really gave you tools to handle them, or even sometimes you feel like if you don't honor every single feeling that you feel at every single moment, then you're like doing your feelings wrong. And that's not exactly helpful either, because our feelings are helpful, but not for us to sit in forever and to ruminate about. Our feelings, when we pause to feel them, actually only really last about 90 seconds. Now, the exceptions to that are things like grief, despair, and rage. Those can definitely be bigger, and oftentimes it's helpful if we are working through those in the presence of another human, preferably a professional who has experience working with those things. Otherwise, most emotions, if you sit and feel them without fueling them with your thoughts, only last about 90 seconds. And if you're worried about it, set a timer for 3 minutes, let yourself feel, and then you can come out of it. But we're going to get into that in a moment. Okay, so we've talked about this pattern. We get why we have it and we see the problems. So now, what do we even do about it? What do we do with these big feelings? Well, number one, we have to notice that it's coming up. So how do we do that? How do we notice, especially if you've been shut down for feelings for a while? So if you've been shutting down your feelings for a while, you may not notice some of the ways I'm going to say first, but I'll share ideas for that in a moment. If you've been connected to your feelings, you may notice body sensations. You may notice different sensations, or you might catch yourself clenching your butt muscles when you're driving, or you might tear up, or you might notice that right before tears sensation in your face if you're feeling sad, or if you're frustrated, you might feel the urge to go, huh? Right? I don't know if Zoom's going to catch that noise because it usually edits out on its own big noises, but it's like that frustrated noise. Or you might notice other sensations coming up in you, like wiriness for anxiety or whatever it is you feel. You might notice the actual emotion themselves. You might notice thoughts going in your head around the feelings. You might notice your behavior changing. Like I notice when I'm really mad, I like if I'm really mad and feeling really overwhelmed by my anger, suddenly I hate all people, which is not true. I'm actually a very compassionate, loving person. But when I feel, and it's more than just mad, but when I feel mad because I feel like I've been slighted, I start to be like, nope, all people are bad. Like, I don't want to leave my house anymore. Right? I want to record my podcast today. Like, I'll notice when I'm feeling that way, that starts to come up. So you might start to notice what different parts of you bring to your attention, what your behavior is, what your urge for behavior is. Like when I'm feeling really upset, I don't want to go anywhere. I don't want to go to something that's supposed to be fun, even because I'm just like, no. So that is a way that you can start to be like, "Oh, yeah, there's something going on here." And then the next thing you can do is acknowledge it like, "Yeah, I see we're having some feelings. There's some stuff coming up." And this is the opposite of what so many of us were taught to do, but you lean in and be curious about what is going on. What are the parts of you feeling? Notice where you feel it in your body. Notice what the emotion is. See if you can even get granular and name the emotion. Brene Brown wrote a really amazing book called Atlas of the Heart, and it's like an encyclopedia of 86 emotions that came up in her research. And it's not as boring as an encyclopedia might be, not to rag on encyclopedias. There's richness to it, but basically she goes over the different feeling experiences in her research of I don't know how many people at this point that she studies, but to help us understand the different feeling experiences and spot them. And why is this important? Well, it turns out that what we call our experience matters. It impacts our experience of the feeling. And so it actually is important. And maybe you don't have to like obsess over getting it exactly correct, but studies show that most humans, especially in the States, can only name three main emotions: happy, sad, and mad, or pissed, or maybe angry, but usually they say mad or pissed. And that's a problem because there is a large spectrum of emotions that are much more meaty than just those three. There's a lot more moving pieces to them that require different kinds of inner work, healing, and coping, I guess you could say. But I don't know that I'm a big fan of emotions just being coped with because they're here to get our attention. Like I said, they're neurobiological signals saying, you do something about this situation. Either do more, do less, address a problem, whatever it is. So once you have acknowledged the feeling is there, you've noticed it, you've acknowledged it, then you're leaning in to be curious to try and understand what it's about. And then can you validate it? Can you validate that you understand that a part of you is feeling this way? And a reminder, validating a part, validating an emotion does not mean that you agree with it. It does not mean that you agree with the thoughts around it or how it got there. But do you get how that part of you has that feeling? And then can you validate it? Can you say, you know what? I really get why you're feeling this way. That makes sense how you got here. Because you're not going to be able to work with the feeling until you're able to do that. Once you've done that, you might notice some softening. And then you can see, what is it that we need now? What is it that we need? And you can give that to yourself. What is it that we need? Well, we're really mad because this person did this. Okay, well, what is it that you need? Well, I need them to stop. Well, they're not going to stop unless you tell them you don't like it and ask them to stop. So that means you need to set a boundary. In most cases, I'm not telling you what to do, right? But you can start to work through what needs to happen next. But as I said, the pieces that need to happen first involve noticing, acknowledging, and leaning in with curiosity and then validating that feeling. And then from there, you can really work with it. So, this gives you a nice little framework to help you be able to work with your big feelings. And if this is resonating, I want to let you know I created something super special and I haven't shared this yet. I might share it with my email list before this podcast drops, but I created a journal book experience and I know you know that, but I want to tell you why. I knew I wanted to write a book and have it be a journal book because I wanted people to have an opportunity to do some of the work I do with people without having to commit to a big program because they might not be ready for that level of commitment or that level of work yet, or just simply might not feel like now is the right time, whether that's financially or otherwise. So I knew I wanted to do this, but then I received a thank you gift from someone who I did a presentation on nervous system regulation to her program, and it was unpaid, but she sent me this beautiful thank you gift, and it was a box with all of these beautiful items that were just so special and so self-care, like, so nurturing in a self-care kinda way, and I remember getting it. I was like, and I opened it, and it was like this present just for me. And so I wanted to create a present for you. So this present is not just the journal book, which is a tangible book, but also these beautiful items that I've included to help you do the self-love woman ritual that I've created to help you do the work and love yourself in the process. So if that sounds good to you, this is on pre-sale right now. I'm recording this on July 10th. So this is on pre-sale right now. Probably I'll leave it pre-sale till the end of July. Everyone says set a deadline, set a deadline. And I'm kind of like, I don't really have a deadline yet because I don't have the box in front of me yet to even be able to really do much to market. So right now we're just in pre-sale. I'm not going to set a false deadline. But right now it's $59, which is a discount from what it will be when it's full price. Feel free, if this resonates, to check out the link in the description or show notes, depending on where you're listening to this podcast. And if this episode resonated with you, I'd love it if you'd like it or leave a comment or subscribe or follow. And I would love it if you know an ADHD woman who would really benefit from listening to this podcast. I would love it if you would share it with her, not just so we can help her, but maybe she'll share it with people and she'll share it with people. And then I can help more ADHD women because we ADHD women are super powerful. We're super creative. We're super charismatic and enthusiastic. And when we are able to overcome the challenges of ADHD and instead embrace our strengths, we do some pretty amazing things in the world. And that's a world I want to live in. So I'd love it if you'd share, and I'll see you next time. Take care.